Today marks the beginning of 100 days of mourning when Rwanda and the world remember the victims of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. In approximately 100 days, over 1 million innocent people perished. Specifically, in the town of Musha, the rural community we support, over 17,000 people were killed.
I am privileged to moderate the conversation between Maritza and Jacqueline, two upstanding people whose voices have and continue to make a difference. And I'll start. Can you tell us about your experience during the genocide and how old you were?
Like any survivor during those 100 days, many times I came face to face with people, neighbors who were seeking to kill me and to kill the people that I loved, not because of anything that we had done, but simply because of who we were, because of our Tutsi ethnicity. Because in 1994, beginning April 1994, the Hutu-led Rwandan government declared that all Tutsis, not any specific Tutsi, but all Tutsis were cockroaches that deserved to die. Despite being aware, even at a young age, that I lived in a country where Tutsis, my ethnic group, were subject to many discriminatory measures. Despite growing up in a country where I knew that there had been other prior massacres of Tutsis, because I grew up, hearing my grandparents and my parents talk about the earlier massacres in the 50s, 60s and 70s. So I was aware of the prior history of killings, and I was aware that I lived in a country where I, as a Tutsi, did not have the same opportunities as my Tutsi neighbors and classmates. But growing up, my parents, like any Tutsi parents, tried very hard to protect us from the injustices that were occurring in the country. So I always say that despite having grown up in such a country that was, again, full of many discriminatory measures, many injustices towards Tutsis, I, like any other children, had goals and dreams. And my parents always made me believe that if I worked hard in school, perhaps I'll be one of those few Tutsis who will be allowed to continue on to high school and hopefully beyond. So they always told us to work hard in school. They always told us that, anything that we wanted to be, we could become. And so myself, my siblings, my cousins, we all had goals and dreams. And none of us really ever thought that anything such as the 1994 genocide will ever occur in Rwanda. And those goals and dreams would be brought to an abrupt and tragic end. So the killing of the president was really the spark which the Hutu-led government, which had planned the genocide, needed to actually begin the killings. And when the morning of April 7th came and the killings began, Rwanda became a place where, for those of us who were Tutsis, it became a place where we did not know whether we were going to survive. We found ourselves in an environment where we had to flee our homes in search of refuge in an attempt to survive. I found myself where I witnessed people being killed around me, many of them my own relatives. And I lived in an environment where each day, whenever I got up, I did not know whether I was going to live to see the next day. The plan of the government was clear. It was extermination of Tutsis and any Hutus who was opposed to that extermination plan. So once again, we came face to face with death. I remember vividly having a group of armed men who had machetes, bloody machetes, who were screaming on the top of their lungs saying, we found cockroaches, we're going to kill you, all Tutsis deserve to die. And it's always very difficult for me to describe how it is to be in a situation like that as a child, as a 9-year-old child, for anybody, but as a child to know that, you're about to be killed, not because of anything that you have done, but simply because of your identity, simply because of your Tutsi ethnicity, something that you did not choose to be. But I remember that whenever I came face to face with people who were killing, who were seeking to kill me simply because who I was, I always thought, all of us always thought that, this was going to be our last day. on earth. And every survivor that you speak today, we always say it's a miracle that any of us survived, because when your own government is trying to kill you, when your own neighbors are trying to kill you, when the international community or people outside the country are doing very little to try to save you, I think it's nothing than a miracle that anybody survives in those circumstances.
I must say that I thoroughly understand your pain. I was 14 at the time of the Hungarian genocide, and every day was a miracle of survival. There were close to 800,000 Jews in Hungary, 800, yeah, and only 200,000 survived. Hungary originally fought on the side of the Germans. So Hitler allowed the Hungarian regent, the head of the country, to deal with his Jews as he wished. Now, he was an anti-Semite, and anti-Semitism was always part of my life experience, but at least he didn't want to exterminate us until Germany invaded Hungary, didn't trust him anymore, and Hitler marched in March 19th, 1944. And that's when the Hungarian genocide began. And just as in Rwanda, in a very short time, practically all the Hungarian Jews were exterminated. Most of the Jews outside of Budapest were what was called entrained, that is, put into cattle cars and wagons and taken to Auschwitz, where they were killed mostly. We in Budapest survived that for a while because they needed people to work, and because the Russian army was approaching. So we were taken to a slave labor camp. I was 14, my sister was 3 years older. And of course, my father was taken much before that. My mother was able to stay at home at that point. So my sister and I were in this camp, and every day we got up at 5 o'clock or so and went to dig ditches. These ditches were about maybe 7 feet deep and 4 or 5 feet wide. The shovels were very heavy, particularly for a 14-year-old girl, but I had to carry it. If I put it down for a minute, one of the guards with guns would come around and start poking me until I went on carrying it again. And that was true of the digging all day with very little food and no rest. If you sat down for a moment, you were poked again with the gun. And if you couldn't stand up, you were shot. It was decided that all Jews in Hungary would be taken to concentration camps. Now, at that point, because there were no cattle cars, no wagons left, they were used for military purposes, we had to walk to the concentration camp in Austria. And my mother decided, we can't cross the border. We knew what these camps were now. We didn't at the beginning, but we knew it was death for sure.
I would like to ask, who or what lives inside you as a source of strength in your life?
You know, I think once you go through that type of experience, you know, it's those first few, you know, weeks, months, and years, it's very difficult. It's very difficult. I always say that it was even more difficult for those of us who are children, trying to understand what had happened in the case of Rwanda in those 100 days, how it is that we had gone from being children with parents, with aunts and uncles, with cousins, with goals and dreams, to now being genocide orphans who had witnessed the most horrific crimes being committed around us. Innocent men, women and children being murdered, being raped, finding ourselves in an environment, as I said, where each day when we woke up, we did not know whether we were going to see the next day. And I remember that for me, what was even more difficult or additionally difficult was later on as I came to this country, because I was one of the fortunate orphans in that I had an uncle who lived in the US. He had left Rwanda many years before. And once he found out that I had survived, he brought me here to this country. And when I came to learn that when the genocide was going on in those 100 days, that many people within the international community, many countries who had the means to end the genocide, they did not. You know, this country, US, could have ended the genocide. UK could have ended the genocide, Belgium and France. And I think for me, that was a big part of the struggle in trying to move on, recognizing that not only had our government and neighbors turned against us, but the whole world. The other place where I draw my strength is from women like my mother. You know, I think about life before the genocide. And I remember how my mother used to struggle, my grandmother, of course, my father as well, but the women in my family, how hard they worked to make sure that we, as their children, had a better future. I draw a lot of strength also from Holocaust survivors. Part of the reason or how I ended up, you know, beginning my activism was after I met a Holocaust survivor when I was a sophomore here in high school, and I had the opportunity to read my classmates, and I had the opportunity to read the book Night by Elie Wiesel. My teacher was wise enough to look for a Holocaust survivor who was willing to come and share his experience. And David Gertzman came to my class and shared his experience. And it was David that who ultimately inspired me to start sharing my own story. Right?
Yeah, it is really amazing. It's and very moving to me how, in a way, how similar our experiences are. And much of it came from my mother also. And I always think of it that she has given me life twice. Had it not been for her on our way to a concentration camp and being able to escape, I wouldn't be here. And strangely enough, I was, through the whole Holocaust experience, I was always afraid. But the moment we decided to escape and we jumped off the highway and hid under the bridge, I wasn't afraid because I was doing something for myself, for my own life. I had agency. I wasn't, even if it was dangerous, it was something that I resisted the Germans and the Hungarian fascists.
And healing is a shared journey for and important for all of us. As RIP helps a rural community heal in many ways, it also offers a healing opportunities to our donors, supporters, and champions. No other event could summarize what we do, why we do it, what it means to survivors, and to those who make our wishes a reality. Maritza and Jacqueline, thank you. Thank you because I know speaking today made you live what you lived many years ago and that you don't want or wish to live again. So for that, we thank you for your sacrifice. We have learned so much from your experience, your resiliency, your commitment to creating a genocide awareness. We cannot stop what we don't know. Thank you for teaching us. To friends of RIP, thank you for what you do. You continue to support our journey to bring hope trust and inspiration to the community of Musha in rural Rwanda. RIP continues its rebuilding efforts in this small corner of the world that has suffered from the genocide against the Tutsi.